And this is called The Last Light, and this is a competitive 4X game that plays 2 to 4 players and plays in about an hour's time, which is a really impressive feat for a 4X game. But something else that's really interesting about this game is that it's actually designed by Roy Canaday, who is one of the main contributors to the Dice Tower. And it looks like he has done some design work in the past, but this is going to be his first published game, and I always am a little bit more skeptical of first-time designers, but I think he's done an amazing job with all the work he's done. He's been designing this one for years, and I am going to be making this one my pick of the week, and not because it's Roy Canaday's design, although I do find that interesting, but I think this game's just offering a really intriguing experience, and it looks like a really solid design with a few design decisions that I am a huge fan of. And the reason this one's called The Last Light is because it takes place just before the heat death of the universe, and players are going to be competing against each other to gather up the last of the light that the universe has to offer. And the reason they are doing this is because it can be used as a type of resource in order to enable that faction to survive the eventual heat death of the universe and continue to live through the universe's rebirth. And there are a ton of different factions that players can play as, each with their own asymmetrical ability, and players will also have a bunch of different ways that they can generate light. One of the main ways of doing that is by being as close to the center of the board as possible, because the last known white dwarf star is at the center of the board, and the closer you are to that white dwarf, the more opportunities you will have to generate light and potentially win the game. And one of the reasons I made this one my pick of the week is because I really do like the way that the action selection is designed in this game, as well as the repercussions of a particular action, which I will get into in a moment. And to start the game, the board's going to be set up with a ton of different planets for players to visit, and the planets are going to be represented by these cool little marbleized miniatures. Players will each be starting on their home colony on their home planet around the outer perimeter of the board, and then players will be able to perform actions to move around the board, build different buildings, generate resources, and try to win the game. Players will each have 6 action cards, and you're going to be using these to perform your actions. And the reason that this game plays so quickly is that players will all be playing their actions simultaneously, which allows the players to be constantly moving forward and making an action every turn. And the first action is the research action, and this allows players to gain new tech cards to upgrade or modify their ships. And the second action is the construct action, and this allows players to build buildings in order to mine or perform different actions on the planets, or they can instead choose to build one of their ships. And there's 3 levels of ships that players can build, with the more expensive ones being the better ones. And the third action is the mine action. This allows the players to generate resources from the different planets that they have buildings on. And the fourth action is the trade action, which allows players to trade different resources in and convert those to other resources. And to do this, players will be using a trade card, and that has a few options listed on it that allow players to convert certain resources into other resources, or to simply just gain a resource. And players will be able to choose any 2 of those trade actions on the card, and they can even choose the same one twice. And the fifth action is the command action. This allows you to move your ships around the board, and whenever you move your ships into an undiscovered location, you're going to be flipping the exploration token that is on that location, and that always gives you a positive benefit, and players will be incentivized to explore new areas so that they get those benefits. This is where players can also engage in battle with each other, and if you move into a location that's already inhabited by an opponent player, then you'll be able to roll dice to attack that player, and the amount of dice that you get to roll and the strength of the relative ships is going to be determined by the types of ships that are in that battle. And an interesting aspect of battles in this game is that they're completely offensive, and the player that moved into that location is going to be the only one rolling dice for that battle and resolving the battle depending on the ships there and the dice that they rolled. And the last action is probably the most important one, because this is the one that resets all your other cards, and this is called the refresh action. And since all your other cards are going to be exhausted, eventually you will have to play this card, although you could play it earlier if you wanted to, because it also has some other benefits like healing all your ships, and it will also gain you light for buildings in the inner rings of the board. But the thing with this card is that it will unexhaust all your other cards, but then it itself will get exhausted after it does that. So you might be wondering, how do you unexhaust this card? And I really love the way that this works, because it only gets unexhausted once all the other players have used the card. So you'll really want to be careful when you use that card, because you don't have complete control over unexhausting it like you do with your other cards. And one other really cool thing that also gets triggered at the same time as players unexhausting the refresh action is that sections of the board are also going to get rotated, moving around the planets and changing the respective locations of the different players. And the game continues like this until a single player reaches 20 light, and then that player will win the game. And if you are interested in this game, I definitely recommend checking out the link in the description below and following along to get notified of its launch. But I also recommend checking out the Board Game Geek page and checking out the videos tab, because there's already a ton of content out for this game, which is something I really would like to see more from other campaigns rather than just jumping into campaigns blindly. I really love when different publishers and designers put out content ahead of time, because the more transparency these publishers have, the more opportunity we have to understand a game and decide if it's right for us. And there's already a ton of playthroughs and how to play videos for you to check that out.